So, Lady Justice Mugure Thande further suspended the Finance Act of 2023 for an extra 5 days. So, this is following a court case by Senator Okia Omtata citing illegalities in the origination of the finance bill. Joining us for this conversation is Wakili Wanjala Opora, who is a tax lawyer and advocate of the High Court. So, asante sana Wakili for joining us at GBS TV Africa Studios to have this conversation. We want to look at the legality of this finance act now that it has been suspended. Is the government collecting taxes illegally?
Yeah, thank you so much for having me here. I'm most grateful for this time. And I think the issue of finance bill, now an act, is a concern of the public, and everyone absolutely is concerned to know then what is the place of this act.
Yes.
And we are aware, as you indicated clearly, the High Court judge, her leadership, suspended the entire act.
Yes.
And it means that actually, as we speak, that act is not in force, and no taxes ought to be collected by the government arising from that particular act. And therefore, just going through town and you're still looking at the petroleum prices, they're still high. EPRA is actually complying with an act of parliament that has been suspended, is definitely problematic. And you really wonder, the government then really needs to consider that they must comply with a court order. A court order is not a suggestion, so it is an order.
Any extra revenue that is being collected now by the government through the fuel taxes is illegal?
Absolutely.
So what happens? What happens to that revenue that's collected? Should it be given back to Kenyans, or how does it work?
Actually, it is illegal, and the government ought not to collect. I mean, I want us to look at it from a different angle. And as a tax lawyer, I will tell you these clients are actually asking us, what happens? There are new regulations, there are changes in VAT, there are changes in excess duty, for example, for banking transactions, and they are wondering, should I pay the taxes as per the new act that has been suspended, or should I rely on the old regime? I mean, it's actually confusion, but the legal position is this, that you cannot collect an extra shilling. Tax is not voluntary, as they say, and therefore, the government should only collect the right shilling, the right amount, and should not pay any extra coin. And so that is really the position.
So how does this affect the finance? Because the Finance Act funds the financial year 2023-24. So how will the government fund its projects without collecting revenue?
I mean, I agree with you. The government needs to collect, no doubt. I mean, the government actually is currently in power, made a number of promises to Kenyans. And so it's only fair that actually they collect taxes. But all that we are saying is, can you first of all do so by following procedure? As we speak, there is the law. You know, the Finance Act has come to amend a number of tax statutes. But VAT was still there on fuel at 8%. Now VAT has been adjusted to 16%. So they can still continue collecting based on the old regime, because that has been suspended. It is this new act that actually has been suspended.
So the government, so they cannot say that they're being obstructed from collecting revenue. They're still getting revenue.
Absolutely, they're still getting revenue. I mean, right now, if you go to shop purchasing something, you're actually paying VAT there, right? If you're using mobile money, you transaction from your bank, for example, or whichever bank that actually you're using, into your M-Pesa account, you're actually paying excess duty. So actually, they're still collecting tax. The issue is that increase of taxes is what has been suspended. Yes.
So Wakili, there's been rhetoric, and especially Busia Senator Okia Omtata cited that the origination of this finance bill was wrong based on who is championing for it. So what is the process of coming up with a finance bill, not voting on it, before it gets to Parliament? What is the process of coming up with it, and who should originate this bill?
Very well. You see, finance bill is defined in the Constitution as money bill.
Yes, it's a money bill.
So under the provisions of Article 114 of the Constitution, it defines money bill. And it says that actually money bill is a bill concerning certain things. One, taxes. Two, charges generally. Or finally, issues to do with raising or reducing the limit or borrowing limit of actually the country. So anything to do with money is actually money bill. But the biggest problem that we have with this bill is that, one, this bill is an omnibus bill. You cannot have a bill that is money bill. It also has things to do with, are you aware that actually in that particular bill, Article 99, sorry, Section 99 of that particular bill down there, it is providing for an amendment to the retirement benefit to the deputy president and other officers. So how do you have such kind of things
In a
married
finance
together
act.
with a finance act? The same act is also including other things to do with statutory instrument act. So things which are not necessarily
Money bills.
money oriented or money bills. So they don't meet that requirement. So that is the biggest problem with that. And that's one thing that actually I think even the good senator is trying to bring out in his petition. Because you cannot really mix these things together. And it's for good reason. Because if it is a money bill, you want to give those who have interest in financial matters to voice more.
Okay.
But if you marry so many things put together, you'll be having limited public participation because I'll focus more on the money and forget about housing levy.
Yes.
I'll focus much on the money and forget about retirement benefits to the deputy president, which they've actually introduced inside that bill. And that's the problem with having a bill, an omnibus bill. So that's the biggest problem.
So it doesn't categorize as a finance act?
For me, I think the court will have to do that because I cannot comment a lot because being an advocate, not from the court, I can't comment because of the doctrine, because the matter is actually in court.
Yeah.
But I think the court will have to consider one simple issue. Is this a money bill under the provisions of Article 114 of the Constitution?
So where should it originate, Wakili, then?
Okay. Now, you see how finance bill begins, it begins very interesting. Remember, under those provisions, it is supposed to be reviewed, but with consultation of the cabinet secretary responsible for finance. So how this bill began? It began by the National Treasury inviting stakeholders to comment on the bill. At that point in time, it was largely a policy, financial policy for the year. Once comments have been made before the National Treasury, I must tell you, I was there in one of those meetings. We gave our comments. Some of the things that actually we gave as comments, some of them passed, sailed through into an act, but some were not actually picked. Then once it becomes now a bill, as a draft bill, now that bill now goes before the committee responsible for finance and planning. That committee will invite stakeholders to come and participate and give their comments and thoughts about the bill. After which, it now goes back to the full house and then they report on what, as a committee, exactly what members have told us, the public, and they feel the bill is good or bad for whatever reason. Then the house is supposed now to vote on that particular bill and to pass it as an act. Now, once it's actually before the house of course can slightly amend the bill here and there. And that's again another concern that okay actually raises issues of how do we amend. Yes, they can amend, but there are cases about it, and courts have said you can amend, but it is actually limited amendment.
So when the Finance and Planning Committee received the stakeholders and they're talking about it, the other day we saw the public participation process, and they heard whatever the Kenyans had to say, but when they went to the House, there was still disparity on it. So is it that, should it be conclusive when the committee is presenting it to the whole committee of the House, or should it just be taken as a report that this is what we gathered and this is it? Because we still saw that there was disparity between the two factions. So what happens at the Finance and Planning Committee?
Yeah, you see, I think the committee, and this is something that even courts have said before, public participation is envisioned in the Constitution under Article 10 of the Constitution, as well as the provision of Article 204 when it becomes financial matters. And the whole idea is let the Kenyans give their views, but your view must not win. So you only need your view. And courts have said that it is not a must that the view that you give takes the day, but your view needs to be taken into account. And let me tell you for free, I think fair enough, some views have been taken into account. For example, one of the major amendments that the Finance Bill Now Act wanted to introduce was to the Tax Procedures Act 2015. And it was a requirement that if you're going to appeal from tribunal to High Court, you must pay 20% of the tax. And Kenyans said, no, this is actually unfair. It's unfair, it's not proper. It's in fact unconstitutional. What did the committee do? They dropped it. And when they were making that recommendation to the House, said, we feel this clause should be removed. So I think there's actually a give and take. But the problem is, how much do they really give and take? I feel like there are a number of issues which Kenyans raise concern. For example, the issue of housing levy. All they did was to reduce the percentage.
And in fact, wasn't reduced because it was 1.5%,
Yes.
which has no cap. Previously, it was 3%, but with a cap.
With a cap.
So right
What
now,
is
it's excessive.
Yes.
So, Wakili, there's the research findings by Tom Wolfe, who is the lead researcher at Trends and Insight for Africa. And you remember when the government was initiating the housing contribution tax levy, they said that they wanted to teach Kenyans how to save. But now, so far, the housing tax levy contribution is now a tax. And no one has talked about it becoming a saving fund anymore. So, what is the legality of this housing tax, considering it went through this metamorphosis?
Yes, I think my biggest problem is the whole idea behind this. I mean, I may not speak like a politician, but I think a politician needs to ask themselves, do Kenyans really need this particular housing levy or tax or whatever name so called? But as a tax lawyer, for me, my concern is introducing deduction to employees for building houses. Does that fit within a money bill? The first question that the court might want to ask is it fitting within the purview of a money bill? Let me tell you, for instance, employees are inducted, pay as you earn,
Yes.
which the government intends to increase to 35 and 3.2,
Yes.
2.5%
Yes.
accordingly. But as we speak, because the act has been suspended, 30%,
Yes.
you are deducted, pay as you earn.
Mm-hmm.
But we do not amend the Employment Act. We have that provision under Section 3 of the Income Tax Act. So I will expect a government which is serious to have amended the Income Tax Act to introduce this housing deduction. Because that is the right place. It is an act that deals with tax.
Yes.
But you cannot go and amend an Employment Act for you to charge a tax. Employment Act purely is concerned with the welfare of the employer and the relationship between the employer and the employee. And so that particular drafting for me is really problematic, and it was in the wrong way. I think we just wanted to have everything in the Finance Act, but they ought to have amended the Income Tax Act for them to introduce it as a tax.
Yeah.
Otherwise, as you speak, I don't know what it is.
So we can't speak of the legality or illegality of it.
I mean, my views as expressed, I find it very problematic and actually a chagrin of Kenya, where you have an omnibus act amending Employment Act,
Rather than
purporting to be introducing an income tax, because actually it is an income tax because you're deducting my income.
yes,
Otherwise, then call it a deduction.
no longer a saving or a contribution.
Yes, so I mean, it's so problematic, and I think it's one issue which the court might have to deal with, and I don't know how the court might judge, but it's an issue that the court might have to look at in light of that. Is it a money bill? And number two, it's a tax. If it's a tax, why amend?
Yeah.
Why introduce it into Employment Act and not
Income
Income Tax Act or any other provision of any of the three acts that we have for tax?
So okay, we also have the processes of how it was passed. The Finance Act was passed in Parliament, and recent revelations by MP Osoro, the chief whip, who also was on record saying this was passed. The government cannot be defeated. So the revelations of how the Finance Act was passed. What's the constitutionalism towards passing such a Finance Act?
Yeah, I mean, watching and just listening to that conversation by a very honorable member of Parliament was not only disheartening, heartbreaking, but it was extremely unfortunate for a country such as Kenya. And I hope that it's a rumor, because if it is true that actually whatever the good MP was actually alluding to really happened, then it will be very unfortunate, because democracy needs not to be bought. We vote for members of Parliament for them to go and represent the views of the citizens, and influencing them by way of bribe or such other niceties would be very unfortunate. And so I hope that actually that didn't happen. But the real question for me as a lawyer would be, legally speaking, is there a problem? If at all it happened, the first thing is then we need to have EACC come on board. They need to investigate the matter, and they need to at least take processes and procedures in this respect. It is only when someone has been convicted of this offense that now we can now bring in the legal element. Does it affect? Otherwise, speaking, it's merely a rumor.
Yeah.
It is an allegation. We cannot really prove it.
And it cannot be taken to court.
Exactly, precisely, until the same has actually be taken through a criminal procedure via EACC. That is when we can now say, perhaps the court should now question, was the procedure undertaken according to the law? Other than speak, it went in accordance with the law. And the other one is merely a political issue, or very politically correct for them to do whatever they did, if at all they did, as alleged by the member of parliament.
Asante sana wakili. There you have it. So one of the major things to take from this conversation is that the Finance Act is still in court as we speak, and the legality or illegality of it will be decided by the courts. Thank you so much.